And members, I'll call this meeting of the State Government Finance Committee to order. This is on a remote hearing that we've established by House rules. It can be live streamed via the House website, via Facebook, and via YouTube. And Sydney, can you call the roll?
Yes. Chair Nelson.
Here.
Vice Chair Cleaborn.
Present.
Representative Albright.
Present.
Okay. Representative Acom.
Present.
Representative Elkins.
Present.
Representative Freiberg.
Here.
Representative Green.
Here.
Representative Hertas. Representative Hewitt.
Here.
Representative Jordan.
Here.
Representative Keel.
Here.
Representative Lippert.
Here.
Representative Long.
Present.
I think you're muted, Representative Long.
Present.
Representative Mason.
Present.
Representative Nash.
Present.
Representative Olson.
Present.
Representative Quam.
Present.
Representative Vogel.
Present.
Representative Hertas.
He may be joining us later, I guess. We have a quorum present. And as I stated earlier, we're holding this a remote hearing pursuant to House Rule 10. Order business today is we have to redo just the vote on House File 2768, the contracts bill. We didn't properly put get a vote on the amendment to put it into House File 2768. So members, I will make a motion to bring back up House File 2768. Sydney, if you want to take the roll. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Well, Sydney wants to do it. We need to
Yeah, I think I have to do the roll.
Gotta do a roll call, yes.
All right, Chair Nelson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Cleaborn.
Aye.
Representative Albright.
No.
Representative Albright.
No.
Representative Acom.
Aye.
Representative Elkins.
Aye.
Representative Freiberg.
Yes.
Yes.
Representative Green.
No.
Representative Hertas. Representative Hewitt.
Aye.
Representative Jordan.
Aye.
Representative Keel.
No.
Representative Lippert.
Aye.
Representative Long.
Aye.
Representative Mason.
Aye.
Representative Nash.
No.
Representative Olson.
Aye.
Representative Quam.
No.
Representative Quam.
No.
Representative Vogel.
No.
Uh, 11 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 absent.
And members, we discussed this thoroughly last week. This is just a procedural motion to fix my mistake from last week for not taking the proper vote. So I move the DE2 amendment, House File 2768. And Sydney, can you take the roll?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make sure that we have that really clean in the record. You are moving the bill as amended. Is that correct?
No, I'm moving the amendment to House File 2768.
Perfect.
to put the contracts into that, and it's a delete all amendment, takes the other things out of it.
Perfect. I just want to make sure the people listening are clear about what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, roll call on the DE2 amendment. Chair Nelson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cleaborn,
Aye.
Representative Albright,
No.
Representative Acom,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Freiberg,
Yes.
Representative Green,
No.
Representative Hertas, Representative Hewitt, Representative Hewitt,
He's got himself muted. Unmute yourself.
Aye.
Representative Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Keel. What was that, Representative Keel?
You got, unmute yourself, Deb.
Sorry. No.
Representative Lippert,
Aye.
Representative Long,
Aye.
Representative Mason,
Aye.
Representative Nash,
No.
Representative Olson,
Aye.
Representative Quam,
No.
Oh dear.
Representative Vogel.
No.
11 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 absent.
So now we have the bill properly before us, and I move that House File 2768 as amended be referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Nash.
Mr. Chair, this is Representative Albright.
Oh, Representative Albright, okay.
I appreciate the follow on to the parliamentary procedure, and as you and I discussed, I don't know if it's because of the digital virtual meeting versus in person, but I would request a roll call on this, formally requesting that. Thank you.
Representative Albright requests a roll call, so we can take a roll call on this. Ms. Spreck, you can take the roll.
Chair Nelson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cleaborn,
Aye.
Representative Albright,
No.
Representative Acom,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Freiberg,
Yes.
Representative Green,
No.
Representative Hertas, Representative Hewitt,
Aye.
Representative Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Keel,
No.
Representative Lippert,
Aye.
Representative Lippert,
Aye.
Representative Long,
Aye.
Representative Mason,
Aye.
Representative Nash,
No.
Representative Olson,
Aye.
Representative Quam,
No. No.
Representative Vogel.
No.
11 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 absent.
With that, members, House File 2768, the motion has prevailed, and it'll be referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Members, the next bill we have on our agenda is House File 1603. The election policy bill from last year. I'll move House File 1603 to bring it before us. Members, there's also a DE2 amendment, and the DE2 amendment, members, get my right piece of paper here, puts on the language it says, it puts on the voting by the mail-in balloting. Members, Representative or Secretary Simon, if you want to give a brief description and you want to testify on that, and please state your name before you speak.
Chair Nelson,
Yes,
if we could also consider the A13 amendment as well.
Yeah, let's start with, we'll do the A, we'll put, so I don't forget this time. I move the A13, we first got to do the A2 amendment, correct? So remember, I move the A2 amendment.
And incorporate the A13 into the motion of the DE2 amendment.
Okay, so we're doing it properly. And I'd like to incorporate the A13 and the A2 amendment, seeing as how it's an author amendment, to have it the way I want it. Members, so now we can vote on the A13 amendment to put the bill in the shape we need to have it. Ms. Sprick, you want to take the roll?
Chair Nelson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cleaborn,
Aye.
Representative Albright,
No.
Representative Acom,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Freiberg,
Yes.
Representative Green,
No.
Representative Hertas, Representative Hewitt,
Aye.
Representative Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Keel,
Aye.
Representative Representative Keel,
I don't know what's going on here.
You're good.
okay, Representative Lippert,
Aye.
Representative Long,
Aye.
Representative Mason,
Aye.
Representative Nash,
Nope.
Representative Olson,
Aye.
Representative Quam,
No.
Representative Vogel,
No.
and then Representative Keel, I'm not sure I heard your vote.
No.
Okay. 11 ayes, 6 nays, 1 absent.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Geldman.
if we could recognize Council Matt Gehring.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, just to clarify the motion that you just adopted, so you adopted the DE2 with incorporating the A13 amendment into the DE2, correct?
That's
So
correct.
the committee has now fully adopted the DE2 amendment.
correct. That's what we did.
Okay.
And with that, Representative Simon, if you want to discuss give your testimony on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Can you see me okay? Because on my screen it says,
Click down in the corner of the video. I think you want to click yourself off a video.
Okay.
There we go.
can you see me?
Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you, members. This bill represents one of 2 tracks that we're all collectively pursuing in terms of determining what is best to handle an election during a pandemic. I'll really be short here because you've heard from me before on this issue, but I've said from the beginning that I think an all-mail ballot approach, universal mail balloting, such as this amendment, is the best way to go, by which every registered voter automatically gets a ballot sent to them in the mail. And this is the best way to conduct an election during a pandemic. It's the same system in place where 130,000 people in Minnesota already have that option. They live in townships or small cities, so it's road tested in Minnesota. Among other things, it would limit exposure at the polling place, not only for voters, but for the 30,000 plus election judges on whom we rely, many of whom come from more vulnerable demographics. Let's just say that. They tend to skew older, and that's precisely the demographic that we want to protect in this kind of situation. I'm happy that we're here and able to continue this discussion, especially after a bipartisan agreement in a separate bill on other election policy items has moved forward in good faith. That has nothing to do with this bill. They're not connected with one another at all. So I'm supportive of vote by mail at both the recommendation of health experts and election experts around the state and country. And while I urge members to vote in support of this legislation, it's become clear to me, of course, that it has a long way to go in terms of securing bipartisan support. Again, this bill has nothing to do with the other heavily negotiated bipartisan bill on the same subject. Thanks for your time.
And we have a Miss Eric. I'm getting feedback from somebody, but we have Miss Erickson. Yeah. Miss Erickson, if you want to, there we go.
Chair, members, my name is Debbie Erickson. I am the chair of the Elections Committee for the Minnesota Association of County Officers. And I too will be brief. I just wanted to reiterate that the MACO is supportive of mail balloting. We had in our platform for 2020 that to allow updating of mail ballot statutes to allow for more precincts to vote by mail, make administrative and mailing processes more efficient, and ensure consistent treatment of registered mail, vote by mail opportunities throughout the state, which basically is supportive of the fact that there is currently, as we've mentioned before, a limit on the location and size of a precinct that can vote by mail. Right now, non-metropolitan counties, townships of any size, and cities under 400 registered voters can vote by mail. We've been getting requests from cities across the state, as well as townships in some of the metro areas as well, that would like to have that opportunity to consider that at their local level for the 2020 elections also. With all of that said, as always, MACO prioritizes the safety, security, and efficiency of the voting process. And we do believe that mail ballot does meet all of those criteria as necessary. So thank you very much.
Miss Erickson, a question I've gotten from some people, and I see there's some hands going up, but I've got some questions from people. My understanding is with vote by mail, you still have to have a precinct or a polling place open so people in that county or township or that city or township can come in and vote in person if they choose to. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. Even in a vote by mail situation, there has to be an in-person voting location. Typically, that is the county auditor's office, or if the county has authorized the city to support mail balloting or absentee voting at their location, it can be done there. But there is a location for voters to either bring their ballots in and vote in person, for voters with disabilities to have access to voting technology, assisted technology to assist them, or to allow for those registered voters who need a witness, who don't have access to a witness in another location, to be able to come in person and vote their ballot in person as well.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. I see we have some hands up for questions. Start with Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Secretary Simon. Secretary Simon, under the A13 amendment, just so I'm clear, do you now have the discretion to close or consolidate polling places? Or is that already in current law?
Secretary Simon.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I don't have the actual language before me, but the idea is, no, in current law, we don't have power to close or consolidate polling places. No, we don't.
And Secretary Simon, just so you know, what it does is it on line one of the A2 or the DE2 amendment, it asserts the direction may include requirements related to the closure of polling places and the availability of vote centers at which all voters in a jurisdiction may cast a ballot, is what it says. Representative Albright.
Okay.
So to your point, Chair, and to current law versus what is in the amended bill before us, they are not the same as what is in current statute. So there is going to be a change that is availing the Secretary of State to, at his discretion, close or change or consolidate polling places. Would that be correct? And maybe we could ask nonpartisan staff to interpret that for us.
Mr. Gehring, if you can shed some light.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Representative Albright, yes. So the amendment, the DE2 amendment grants the Secretary of State authority to direct that the election be conducted primarily by mail. And then as part of those directions, the Secretary is newly empowered to direct that polling places be closed or that vote centers be open to accommodate the mail balloting procedure. So that's a new process, yep.
Representative Albright.
I'll hold my further questions until we close.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question or
Who is the author of this bill?
Mr. Chair, or Representative Albright, the author of,
This is Nash.
Representative Nash, sorry. The author of this bill, 1603, is Representative Dehn.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure that we put that on the record because he's not here presenting the bill. But there was a comment from earlier that there were no linkages between the negotiated bipartisan bill and this one. And yet, the author is the same, one of the same people who negotiated the other bill that we dealt with last week. So I didn't want it to go on record as that there are no linkages because the commonality is in its authorship. I have a grave number of concerns about this bill. I don't believe anybody thinks I'm going to actually vote yes for this nonsense, but I have significant issues with how this came forward and that this came forward, but also didn't want to go past the idea that there aren't linkages because there quite clearly are. You know, the DFL majority has decided to bring this forward. I can guarantee you the outcome, but I think that the message that gets sent to all Minnesotans on this should be very clear that from where I sit, and I believe many of my caucus sits, this is apparently the new elections bill. It was brought forward quickly. It's been given priority. And I find that troublesome and didn't want to, again, let it go that there isn't a linkage because there quite clearly is. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I will probably have comments later.
I see Representative Dehn who is with us. Representative Dehn, did you want to speak to that? Representative Dehn.
Well, I just want to clarify that I am here in this meeting. Not sure why I didn't get to present my bill. I will reference some of the comments that Representative Nash made. In addition, as we negotiated, I believe it's Bill 3499, which you, Mr. Chair, are the chief author, is also an elections bill. I know that this bill is a bill that gives some members in the GOP great cause, which is the primary reasons why I've been involved in negotiations for House File 3499. I'm not naive enough to think that this bill, as in its current form, is likely to get the votes necessary in the Senate to actually pass, which is why I believe it's critical that we continue to work and understand that 3499 is a critical bill to make sure that we have policies and safety measures in place for our August and November elections. So I just wanted to clarify a couple of statements that were made. And I'm free to any questions too, if folks would have them.
Thank you, Representative Dehn. And I wasn't, you're not presenting the bill. It was that I made the motions because you're not on the committee. But Representative Nash, did you want to say more now, or do you want to wait till later?
I'll save additional abuse for later.
Next I have on the list is Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first is a comment because Representative Albright did ask my question on the A13, which is a consolidation of power. And this is a massive consolidation of power to one person. And we're already dealing with a governor that has, in my opinion, abused his power. And now we're going to give authority to somebody, with all due respect to Secretary of State. The majority of the people in Minnesota don't even know who you are. And now you're going to have the authority to close their polling places. And that's just, it's not acceptable. But I do have a question for Ms. Erickson.
Go ahead with your question.
Ms. Erickson, can you tell me who the county officers that you're dealing with are? Are they county commissioners? Are they auditors? Who do you represent?
Ms. Erickson.
Chair, Representative, the group that I represent is county auditors, county officials from the election administration standpoint of things. I do not speak for the county commissioners.
Well, that's good to know, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That's good to know because I've spoken to many county commissioners, not just my own, and they're absolutely not in favor of the mail-in ballots. It's in fact, some of them got pretty angry, as a lot of people in my area are boxed in right now, and the tensions are running very high. And so I heard in no uncertain terms that they are not in favor of this bill. This is another it's another power grab. We are just subverting our whole process, not just our elections, but also our legislative process over this. So I'll absolutely be voting no, and I encourage everyone else to as well.
Representative Keel. If you unmute yourself.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have had some constituents concerned myself and wondered if I could ask Secretary Simon with regard to mail-in ballots and request, is there a way we can request a ballot rather than just automatically mailing them out in the townships of the city? Would that be something, this constituent was very concerned that we were just carte blanche mailing them out. And of course, I come from one of the earliest townships in county that had mail-in ballots. So is there a way we could actually have people request a ballot before we're mailing it out in light of disabilities and aging and all of those things?
Representative or Secretary Simon.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Representative Keel, yes, under current law, any eligible Minnesotan right now, current law, can ask to get a ballot sent to them at home. They either have to go to our website, which is mnvotes.org, or they can go in person to a county or city office, or they can fill out a piece of paper otherwise that they might get or download, I suppose. So yeah, right now under current law, anyone can request it. And that is the subject of the bipartisan compromise, heavily negotiated bill that's on that separate track.
Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Am I hearing feedback? I guess that's what it is.
Somebody must be unmuted, getting back feedback. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. This specific request is that we not mail out any ballots until they've been requested. Right now, I believe if a township requests ballots, then or the township assigns it, then it just automatically comes out. Their concern is that they thought we should change that whole direction and make it requestable, not like it is now, but not just automatically getting ballots.
Representative Simon, do you want to comment or?
No, I think that's, I understand what Representative Keel is saying.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Cleaborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And these comments are to Secretary of State Simon. Quick questions for you. But I want to address just a couple of comments first. To Representative Green's comment that nobody in the state knows who you are, I was pretty impressed by the fact that you did receive 52% of the vote in 2018, and that was well over 1 million voters. So I would congratulate you on the fact that 52% of our people who vote know who you are. To Representative Keel's comment, the cost, I want to know how much it is an additional administrative cost for each of our counties. Is that correct? For us to request the ballots, then fill out that application and then send it back out. Is that correct?
Representative Simon.
Yes, thank you. And Representative, yeah, that's exactly right. If you look at the fiscal note before you right now in this bill, so this is just the pure vote by mail where everyone gets it automatically. If you look at it, it comes down to $2.38.50 per ballot. $2.38.50 per ballot. Now, even if 1 or 2 million vote that way, that's a lot of money, but not as much money as operating under current law. Under current law, you would have to add another wave of printing, of envelopes, and of postage in addition to this. So this is the cheaper version. $2.38.50 is what it comes down to for the counties and cities. It would be probably considerably more than that for another round of processing the actual absentee requests. So it would be more expensive.
Mr. Chair. Okay, and I just want to make sure that I'm also clear. Currently, you have testified before that 30,000 voters already received these ballots by automatic vote by mail. Is that correct?
Secretary Simon.
Representative Cleaborn, I should be a little more specific than that. It's that 130,000 people live in jurisdictions where that is the law, not necessarily that 100% of them are voters. But 130,000 people live in places where that is the rule, where if you're a voter, you automatically get the ballot sent to you.
Okay, and then to just ask the question, in those jurisdictions where we do vote by mail currently, has there been a high percentage of voter fraud in that area of those jurisdictions?
Secretary Simon.
Mr. Chair and Representative Cleaborn, not only has there not been a higher percentage, I've consulted Ms. Erickson, I've consulted our own elections director, David Maeda, who has decades of experience in this area. We don't know of a single case, not one, not a single case. And if there is one, maybe we just don't know about it. We don't know of a single case in those jurisdictions of voter fraud.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. It's so weird to do this way. My question then, as we are looking at allowing, let's say, my jurisdiction of the city of Plymouth, I'm trying to figure out why the people of Plymouth would not be entitled to the same ability to just have a ballot mailed to them. Why should they have to go through the process of requesting, waiting, and then why should they have to have a two-step process?
Secretary Simon.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Cleaborn, that's a good question. I think that's what this DE amendment is all about, is saying just for the time being, just for this pandemic. Remember, the idea here is everything snaps back to normal after this, but just for this pandemic, everyone should have the same opportunity that Representative Keel and her constituents do where she lives.
Okay. And then one last comment, please.
Representative Claiborne.
I just want to make sure that everybody's really clear. This bill would protect our poll workers. It would protect our seniors who currently live in buildings where polling actually occurs at this time. And by doing this, everybody would have the right to, without having to be concerned about their physical health or exposure to COVID. Is that correct?
Secretary Simon.
Mr. Chair and Representative Cleaborn, yes, that's the idea, correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to piggyback on what Representative Cleaborn has mentioned of the context in which we're discussing this bill. When we brought up this bill last time, there was a lot of talk about the Wisconsin election, and there was just news this morning that the state health department has announced that there were 36 COVID positive individuals that could be traced back to the election that they had. And this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. The state health department has had to go so far as to give specific tracing information to all of the local county health officials about how to trace back to COVID related to the Wisconsin election. So that's the context in which we're discussing this. We know that making people go to the polls is going to put poll workers at risk. It's going to put voters at risk. And we've seen, we don't need to look any further than the state to our east to know what the impact is going to be, and that this could really mean people's health in our state. And to, I think, Representative Cleaborn's point on questions to Secretary Simon on fraud, in addition to our own examples, if you look at states like Colorado or Oregon or Washington, they also have next to zero cases of fraud from mail-in balloting. I think Oregon over there, the last 2 decades has had 2 cases that they can point to. So fraud is a really red herring. And finally, I just wanted to mention that I think mail-in balloting shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's been done in red states and blue states. Our nonpartisan election administrators are telling us that this is the way to go for this particular election. So I think it's entirely appropriate for us to be lifting up what is the best solution. What we are hearing from our election administrators is the solution that will work while we're still working on a fallback option bill in case we're not able to get the best solution done. So I think those are two appropriate tracks. We do that all the time in the legislature, where we work on the bill we want and the bill that we might be able to pass. And so I just think there's a much ado about not a whole lot here in terms of the fact that we're actually pushing for the solution that we all know would work and would actually help keep people safe while we're negotiating other options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Albright, do you want to speak now or do you want to wait till the end?
Mr. Chair, I'll wait until the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Keel. Are you still, I got your hand up. Do you
There
still
we
want
go. There you go. Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this second bite of the conversation. First of all, I want to make it clear that while I really appreciate the mail-in ballot because of the challenge of judges and the cost, I really kind of rethink that myself. I was actually approached by a citizen that also is in a smaller township that really had some very big concerns about the fact that we all of a sudden are handing out, and really that's honestly what it is. We're handing out ballots to people who intentionally want to vote or don't want to vote. And so his concern, and I think it's very valid, is that we want people to intentionally go to vote. We don't want to just say, oh, well, this is a right, this is a privilege to be able to voice our opinion about who is elected, what we do, who spends our money, and how we support our area, whether it's our township, our committee, our school district, whatever, our community, our county. But my point, I'm really kind of fighting for this thought process in my area, my district. There are people that really feel like it does not hold the respect when we just say, here's a ballot, go ahead. I would tell you that a lot of my senior citizens, and I have a lot of them, that can't necessarily, especially go to vote in November. And I appreciate the ability for them to go when they're healthy or when they're the weather's better, because there's often when we've had horrible storms during elections, that they're able to do those things. I appreciate parts of the no excuses voting. However, the concern of the citizen is just that, and he's not the only one. He's just the one that put it in writing. I hear it all the time. Are we just making it like whatever? And we have all these people that get ballots and either use them or don't use them. And of course, there's always a concern of fraud. I know everyone says, oh, well, it's not an issue. Yes, it is. And it is a privilege. And I think the argument has to be that we have to respect the privilege to be able to voice our opinion within our area or our state. And I wanted to reiterate that fact. And the other thing I would make comment of is, yeah, we're saving money at the expense of what? Sometimes we spend money because we need to do the appropriate thing. I mean, we could say everybody can email, we can save ourselves money that way. But in fact, we want to make sure that people are intentionally going to vote. And yes, we need to figure out that we're appreciating the privilege. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Albright, you're the last person I have on the list for right now. Representative Albright, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wondering if Ms. Erickson is still on the call.
Yes, she is.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Erickson, you mentioned in your comments, and I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there are a number of cities that have called and requested the opportunity to provide mail-in balloting. Could you cite those for us here? And if so, I'd also request that you provide that list to the members of this committee.
Ms. Erickson.
Mr. Chair, Representative Albright, I can tell you the 3 from my county who have asked about the opportunity for them to consider that. The cities of Baxter, Cross Lake, and Crosby have inquired as to whether or not that was an option for them to consider. I can't speak for any others. I have not heard from other communities, other than I know that some auditors have told me, other election administrators have told me that they've had requests from their cities as well in some of their communities that have asked what that opportunity is for them. I do know that in the last session, there were some smaller metro area cities and townships who had also come before the legislature with asking for that same opportunity, with that exclusion from the metro area to be considered of being lifted as well. I don't have the citing of the actual bills that was involved with, but there was a bill that was introduced in the last session, I believe.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This next question is for Representative Ray Dehn.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Dehn, members of our caucus are a little mystified in terms of what's going on here with elections. It doesn't seem obvious to us anymore in terms of the direction of your caucus with regard to what you intend to move forward. So I'm asking you here right now, which bill are you in support of?
Representative Dehn.
Mr. Chair and Representative Albright, if you're asking my personal preference versus what I think that we can do actually procedurally regarding the Senate, I think there are 2 different responses. Personally, I believe that sending an absentee ballot to all registered Minnesota voters is probably the most effective way in making so voters don't have to choose between their personal safety and their health and participating in our democracy and voting. A lot of arguments have been made pro and against doing that, and I certainly understand those arguments. I also know that politically, we've done some work, Republicans, Democrats, and the Secretary of State in the House to put together a bill that I think is something that is plausible and possible to reduce the number of people that may come to the polls on Election Day in August, but also more specifically in November. I'm 100% supportive of 3499 in what is possible, and I support 1603 in what is ideally what would be the best things for voters in the state of Minnesota. So that's my way of not giving you a simple answer, but explaining the differences between these 2. I understand that there may be other elections bills coming out of the Senate, and we'll debate them and we'll have discussion. But if we don't do something to address the issues of our elections this coming November, I think we will all sort of be looking at a dereliction of our duties to try to protect Minnesota voters and the people that work our polls.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Representative Dehn, 3499 accomplished all of those goals, and it was bipartisan. So I'm lost for an understanding, tongue-in-cheek, for why your caucus would want to bring forward 1699 and amend it in such a fashion that literally you are handing to the Secretary of State discretion over polling places, consolidation and closing of those, and expanding his powers when at a time when we're already wondering what kind of expansion of powers our governor has had. You're running down that same road with the Secretary of State. And to the point that Representative Long made, I'm trying to figure out which one is your fallback position. Because from the context of what you've just said, I think it leads the entirety of those in my caucus, as well as some in yours, I'm sure, to understand really what the initiative is here. Election law is about bipartisanship. We have that in 3499. You want to play the game with 1603, or excuse me, 1603 on the floor, that's fine. You can take your vote. But why don't you call us when you get serious? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Albright made many of my comments, but we're to walk through some of the discussions that we had that led to the bipartisan bill that we put together. We talked about making it so that the Secretary of State did not have what is perceived as executive powers or a large amount of power in this upcoming election. We voiced the concerns of not just our caucus, but the people who support us, the GOP voters across the state, by and large. And we said that granting this level of discretion and power to the Secretary of State is going to cause tremendous amounts of distrust, uncertainty, doubt, fear, and anger. And we negotiated that part out of the bill. We changed the language of the previous bill to remove that. And we've just found out that many of those powers in this DE are getting put back into the bill. We talked about how all by mail balloting was known to be dead on arrival, and how the elections bill needed to be one that would be bipartisan. And yet, we found out the night before the vote came for the bipartisan crafted bill that there was going to be another elections bill. And as I said last week, and I'll maintain again today, it's abundantly clear to myself and our caucus that the bill that we're talking about right here, right now on this teleconference is the elections bill. It's not bipartisan. And it's going to move forward so that your caucus, I would imagine, can score some political votes and gain some political clout. When the efforts of at least heretofore in the last biennium, elections bills have been bipartisan and apolitical. But we can't say that about last year's, and we certainly can't say that about this bill. So this is going to come to the floor, and my guess is, given the level of priority that this has been given, and that this was made at a leadership decision that this was going to be coming forward, that this is going to send a message again to Minnesotans that the partisanship is palpable, and that this bill represents a disinterest in bipartisanship around elections. And for that reason, I would urge all of our members to absolutely vote no on this, not just here. I'm sure it's going to go to Ways and Means. I believe that's where its next destination is, and I hope that it gets the stuffings knocked out of it. But as I had said last week, this is very much like a shell game or a game of three-card Monte. We talked about how we want a bipartisan bill and how we should negotiate that and make sure that everyone understands the bipartisanship is there, and that you could practically have a little hug fest in the bipartisanship. Well, that's gone. And as a result of that, I think that messages have been sent clearly to anyone who's watching and anyone who will hear about this. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm voting no.
Representative Claiborne, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The comments that I'm hearing today are just fascinating to me. One, any member can bring multiple bills before any committee. So for Representative Dehn to have multiple bills with different content is not surprising to me. There is more content for elections that I would like to see in Representative Dehn's bills, and that's a conversation I'll have with him on another day. But also too, I want to discuss this issue about voting. And this is no game, by the way. I real offense for anyone to say that my vote is just a party line thing. It isn't. I work really hard to represent my community, and this is no game to me. Making sure that people have the right to vote is what people died for. All the vets that we support, they went to work to make sure that we have the right to vote. It's not a privilege. Driving is a privilege. Voting, fundamental right. And to be able to say that we can get people a ballot and they can choose whether they use it or not, hey, I don't see the big problem with that. Get people a ballot, let them vote. If they maybe weren't driven because they don't have a driver's license to go to the balloting place, they should still have the right to vote. This is something that is just core to who we are as US citizens, and it is not a game. So I really take offense to that. The other piece that is really concerning to me is this whole conversation about we had a deal. Well, some of us weren't in the room when these larger conversations were taking place. There were citizens in our state who weren't in the room when these conversations took place. And I think it's really great that we have this opportunity to use this technology today for people to be able to see what we're discussing. It's their vote we're talking about. It's not what Jenny Cleavorn thinks. It's not what Representative Nash thinks or Representative Keel or Chair Nelson. It's the citizens of our state and their vote that matters. And if we can allow them an opportunity to vote and be healthy, I honestly don't see the problem with that, especially when it's cheaper. Thank you.
Representative Dehn, if you want to wrap up your bill.
I do, and it's, I'm not sure where to start. This has been a very interesting process. For clarity, there were a lot of things said. House File 3499 is not my bill. I was involved in the discussions regarding it. I think it's a bill that does what we need to do for our elections in November. 1603 is before us, and we can talk about what the bill is in its current form all we want. In many ways, it has many less provisions than the original 1603 had in it, which Representative Nash and Representative Albright referenced as not a bipartisan bill. But I want members, I want you, Mr. Chair, and I want folks of the public to know that 3499 is an important bill for us to conduct our elections this coming August and this coming November. We can talk about the things that we do at the Capitol as a political process. I don't think we should be shocked that the Capitol is political. I don't think we should be shocked that the majority sometimes does things that the minority does not like. Prior to the beginning of this biennium, I spent 4 years in the minority in the House, and House Republicans did things that I didn't believe was bipartisan. They were things that I didn't think was like, even in discussions and negotiating conversations about certain types of bills, those would change. But that's why we have majorities in our legislative bodies, so that we can actually get the work done. But I still want to stand on what I said when I spoke earlier, and here as I'm closing, that I believe that there is a opportunity and the ability for House File 3499 to get through the House and get through the Senate and get to the governor's desk, so that we can have a safe and accessible elections this coming November. And as I said earlier, if we don't do that, I would consider it a dereliction of our duties. So we can turn this into a partisan issue, and you can argue that bringing 1603 was a partisan move. I'm not going to argue with that. But what I am going to argue is $34.99, which was negotiated in good faith. There was no shell game. There was no three-card Monte and all those other accusations. And I take exception to those accusations. It's a good bill, and we should make sure that we move that to the governor so we can assure the safety of our elections this coming November.
So members, with that, I will renew my motion that House File 1603 as amended be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
Mr. Chair, I would request a roll call vote.
Roll call being requested. Ms. Spreck, can you take the roll?
Vice Chair Claiborne,
Yes.
Representative Albright,
No.
Representative Acom,
Aye.
Representative Elkins,
Aye.
Representative Freiberg,
Yes.
Representative Green,
No.
Representative Hertas, Representative Hewitt,
Aye.
Representative Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Keel,
No.
Aye.
Representative Long,
Aye.
Representative Mason, Representative Mason,
She's mouthing aye, but Representative, may you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear now?
Yep.
Yes,
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Nash,
No.
Representative Olson,
Aye.
Representative Quam,
No.
Representative Vogel,
No.
Chair Nelson.
Members, during a time like this, while I do support the concept of this, at this time I have to vote no because of things commitments I made to people on the earlier bill that was talked about and discussions, but I'm voting no on this bill.
Ten ayes, 7 nays, and 1 absent.
With that, members, this bill is referred to Ways and Means. Members, in your stuff that was mailed to you, we have the minutes. Representative Claiborne, do you want to do a motion on the minutes?
I would make a motion on the minutes, except I have one quick clarification. When I made a motion for the correction of for the minutes of the last meeting, Representative Freiberg, I believe, corrected the date. Does that need to be read in the minutes themselves? And if so, I would ask that that be included in the minutes.
Mr. Geldman. Did you get the question?
I would defer to Council Matt Gehring.
Why don't we hold on to the minutes then and we'll check that and correct them and take them up at our next meeting.
Thank you.
With that, members, there's no further business being before us. The meeting is adjourned.